Kiehnle,
Hey, Kurt.
welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Yeah, you just flew in. I just picked you up at the airport.
Yeah, it was a great flight.
So you live in Newport Beach, California.
I
How
do.
long have you been living there?
Geez, moved to Newport Beach. It's been 27 years.
Now, when you first went there, did you fall in love with it and you're like, I have to live here?
Yeah, I first went out there when I was in college just to visit a fraternity brother that I got a job out there, and I immediately fell in love with the California culture.
But more so Orange County.
Well, yeah, Orange County is kind of like a suburb of LA, so it's about an hour's drive south, and it's considered like a much more livable, safer area.
It's gorgeous there.
Yeah.
I've been there a few times and I love it every time I go. The
Well,
weather's perfect. Would you say it's amongst the best weather in the United States? Like
uh,
on average?
I'd say so. I mean, sometimes we get seasons of fog and rain, but for the most part, I certainly can't, complain.
Now, what are your summers like? Are they comfortable or are they like difficult?
Summers are very comfortable. Since I'm close to the water, we'll get highs sometimes in the 80s, 90s. Very rarely do we get over that, and it's a dry climate, so it's really
And what are
comfortable.
how cold does it get there? Like what's the coldest winter you
It
remember?
gets into the 40s. Sometimes we have to turn the heater on in the house because it gets cold, but it's not certainly not shorts and t-shirts weather year round. I mean, we have seasons, but it's not as prevalent.
Now, Florida traffic's gotten really bad, but California traffic, specifically LA and Orange County, has always been bad. So
That's
how
right.
do you navigate the traffic? How do you navigate those
Well,
highways?
fortunately, I'm not, commuting where I have to go to a job in the morning. But if I have to go, say, to Los Angeles, best time to travel is after the rush hour. So you're talking late morning, early afternoon. You don't want to be on the roads after 3:30, 4 o'clock, because then you're going to be sitting in traffic. And hopefully, at least you have a carpool lane pass. If you have another passenger or you have like an EV, then you can drive in the carpool lane, and it makes a difference too.
So now you're married, so you're a husband,
I am.
you're also a father and
Yes.
a grandfather.
Yes.
So tell us about your wife and kids.
All right. Well, I met my wife, gosh, years ago in New York, and that's a story unto itself. I don't know if we want to cover that, but been married 31 years, have three children. My oldest is my boy Tyler. He's 31. He lives in Huntington Beach, which is close to Newport, and he's got a beautiful, lovely wife, Claire, who we love. We look at her as a third daughter, and they have two beautiful children who are my grandchildren, Wesley and Colette. And then I have two daughters, single daughters, Kristen, who's 28, and Grace, who's 23. And Grace is living at home. Kristen lives up in LA.
And what does Kristen do?
Kristen models. So, but she's also an entrepreneur. She's developing a swim line and wants to start her own company. So she's been working on that, but she's been a successful model since she's been 14 years old.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, wasn't your wife once a model herself?
She did a little modeling, but I wouldn't say in the same area, same league as what Kristen does. Kristen actually makes a full-time living modeling.
And what does your son do?
Tyler works for a financial investment advisory firm. So he went to a school back east and started a job back there, and now he's working in the West Coast in Newport for this firm. I would rather not name him, but yeah,
So speaking about back east, you're
yeah,
originally from the New York area.
I am.
So where exactly were you born and raised?
I was born in New Rochelle, New York. Have you heard of it?
Westchester County.
Yes.
New Rochelle, New York is one of the greatest places you can be born in and live in. I'll tell you why. My thought, real quick.
Yeah.
You're so close to Manhattan. You're just a train ride away from the greatest city
Yeah.
in maybe the world. I don't know, the U.S. at least.
No, it's a great place to grow up because you have the access to the city, a quick commute, like you said, but then you're living in quiet suburbia, lot of greenery. So when I tell people from New York, they automatically assume I'm from the big city, but I'm from a really nice, beautiful
So how do you
area.
explain that? Do you explain to them, well, there's an upstate and there's a downstate, and we're north of the city, we're north of the Bronx. I mean, like, do you try to give them a geographical sense of where Westchester is
Yeah, I
located?
basically say it's 45-minute drive outside the city, north of the city, right below Connecticut, and so they get a better geographical idea that
Yeah,
way.
because there's like an East Coast where like you would take a train that would take you from Manhattan all the way up to Connecticut, right? And then there's the West Coast, which is like West Point, the
Right.
Harlem. I'm sorry, the Hudson.
Yeah.
Because I was just talking to somebody recently, and they asked me if I ever went to a West Point game. I said, "Of course I have.
Yeah.
It's one of the greatest traditions you can
No,
do."
I played in a West Point game.
Did you? So tell
Yeah.
us about that.
No, that was probably one of the highlights of my college football career where we played a game at West Point
So what college did you go to?
and we lost 26-20. Close game. I went to Lafayette College. I started at Villanova and I played 1 year at Villanova, and then they abruptly dropped the program and I wanted to continue to play. So fortunately, Lafayette came and recruited me and had a spot, and I played there for 3 years.
So well, just to back up for a second. So obviously in high school, you played sports.
Oh, yeah.
right? So what you did the whole basketball, baseball, football thing?
Yeah, I was one of those kids where I just loved sports as a kid, and so I played whatever was in season. And so, in springtime, it was baseball, winter is basketball, fall and football, and, I just loved all the sports, but I had to decide what I wanted to take into college, and I decided that I probably had a more of a love for football than
But
anything
why
else.
is that though? Why football?
Well, football really you can't just play organized football, outside of being on a team or being at a school. I figured I could always play basketball in a rec league or at the Y or in pickup games. I mean, I still always had a love for basketball, but football was kind of like I knew I was only going to have 4 more years in college to play, so I really didn't want to miss that.
You know what I liked about football is that we're such a camaraderie. There was such a team element, a group element. You know, some of my friends from high school who I speak to on a daily basis to this day, actually,
Yeah.
are on that team. You know,
Oh
and
yeah.
it made such wonderful friendships because there's 11 guys on one side of the ball,
Yeah.
22 total, plus everybody else. So it's like 40 guys on one team, more or less.
No, it's a brotherhood. It really is. I mean, you guys you go to battle with, and it's a lot of great memories. To this day, I'm still friendly with most of the guys in college that I played with. As a matter of fact, there are a few that live here locally that I'm going to see hopefully this weekend.
Now, for you to play college football, you had to have had exceptional talent, right? Because it's not easy. And you played what? One was it one double A?
Villanova was a 1A program, and then Lafayette was a step down. They're in the Patriot League, and so they're the one double A. But it's a lot of competitive
Yeah, I
football.
mean there are still guys that go to the NFL from the one
Oh,
double A.
absolutely, yeah.
I mean, you know, these are big guys that are hitting each other.
No, it's
So,
it's only gotten better.
what was your position
I
at Lafayette?
played a defensive end, which is kind of like a stand-up outside linebacker position at Lafayette, and so I dropped back into coverage at times. I'd rush the passer at sometimes, and I'd have to keep contained on the outside. So that was my
Like
position.
Ted Hendricks of the
Oh,
Raiders.
I'd love to think of myself as Ted Hendricks. I'd rather prefer Lawrence Taylor. That'd be a good.
Did
good
you ever have any like interceptions, fumble recoveries, any touchdowns?
Oh, sure.
What were some of the great things you did at Lafayette on the field?
No touchdowns, but definitely some fumble recoveries, and I had an interception as well. So it's fun. It's just it's a great team sport and a lot of great memories, and yeah, I miss it.
So what was your major at Lafayette?
I was a business economics major at Lafayette, and so just had a broad background in terms of finance, and it was a great education. But to be honest with you, I didn't take my schooling seriously back then. I just really had a lot of fun living in a fraternity house, playing football, and having a girlfriend. And so back then, it was just graduate. Wasn't a question of what my GPA was.
But you got out of college, I want to say it was in the 80s, right? 80, you graduated 83?
84.
So
Yeah.
back then, 84, I mean, everybody was all about going to Wall Street. Everybody was all about
Oh my
making
gosh.
money, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was all about that
No,
Ronald Reagan-esque,
I was
you
just going
know.
to say, Reagan era was during the 80s, and Wall Street was booming, and the economy was doing really well, and it was almost like a period of prosperity and of excess in a way. So it was a great time to get out of school and live and work in New York City. I loved it.
So you took that degree and had some success with it. I mean,
Well,
you
you
did
learn,
well for yourself.
you have a great honestly, you have a broad brush understanding of the business world, but you don't really learn anything until you start your job. Because I got into the insurance industry, and of course, I didn't take any insurance classes in college. But I just had I think what my drive was just being competitive, and I was in a sales position, and so I always like to make deals and be.
So is it safe to say that your athleticism and your competition helped you when you got into the sales world?
Yeah, I'd say that most definitely. Just being a competitive person and wanting to close a deal, and having interpersonal skills, and also the discipline to follow up and stay on top of things and be organized. Those are all things that
You know what else too? I think you have to be likable. Like you have to make yourself in a position where people generally want to spend time with you,
Oh, sure.
and they
Yeah.
enjoy seeing you.
Yeah.
Like they're happy that you're at their office or
Right.
taking them at
Oh
lunch.
yeah. I mean, you're competing against other people like yourself, and it's a question of people want to do business with someone they like. So I agree with that completely.
So during all this time, as your young career was taking off, you were living in Manhattan. So what was that like?
That was wonderful. I actually live with a good friend of mine who's a good buddy of mine to this day, and we shared an apartment on the Upper East Side. And I had probably a proximity of 15 good friends that lived on the Upper East Side, and we worked hard and we played hard. We had a lot of fun
I
together.
mean, you were in it's a playground. You had the best restaurants,
Yeah,
bars,
yeah,
clubs, pizzerias,
yeah, oh yeah.
Madison Square Garden, right? You can go see Knick games, Ranger games. I mean,
Yeah,
the
no,
Jets,
I
Giants.
took advantage of it all. It was wonderful. It was great. And in the summertime, we'd all get in a house in the Hamptons together. We'd have 15 guys with little half shares, all splitting a house right on the water in the Hamptons. So we had a lot of good times together. It was hard to leave it, but I ended up meeting the right girl, and my life went in a different direction.
So what were some of your hobbies and interests back then? Like what were you doing other than work? Were you a golfer, tennis?
I played golf and tennis, but I really just my routine was to get home from work, and I lived on the Upper East Side. I'd immediately throw on my shorts and t-shirt, and I'd go for a run in the park. So I was a big runner, and just always wanted to get my heart beat, and always wanted to sweat.
So when you say that, you're talking about Central Park,
Central Park, yeah.
and they had a nice big reservoir there. You can run around that, right?
Yeah,
There's other.
no, I would do a couple of laps around the reservoir, and there's also a place to meet people, and it's just you never felt in the city when you were in the park, and I love that. That was my favorite part.
So to this day, I know you're a proud Californian, but are you like really thankful that you grew up in New York, or
Oh, completely.
like how much do you give New York for your success in life?
Totally, a lot of it. I mean, I'm a New Yorker at heart. I mean, I still root for the Jets and the Knicks and the Giants and the Rangers, and so I'm a New Yorker at heart. But I mean, California is just where I want to be right now.
Do you think that being a New Yorker makes you a little sharper, as far as like sizing somebody up, or perhaps maybe like, I don't want to say people that live outside of New York are naive or anything like that, but
Mhm.
there's a certain edge that a New Yorker has that other people don't have. For an example, I like to think that I think maybe I'm a little bit more aware of my surroundings. I'm a little bit more conscious of who I'm talking about. I think I can size somebody up a little bit faster,
Uh-huh.
only because that's the way I was raised in New York.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that?
Um, what's interesting about New Yorkers is I think you have to earn their trust, and I think having street smarts really helped me in the business world, and that's what it's all about. I mean, people from the East Coast, for the most part, will tell you exactly how they feel, and some people get turned off by that. But I'd rather have someone be open and honest with me.
Direct.
Direct, yeah. When I moved out west and I spent 4 years in Arizona, I felt like I was making friends, and all the people I was doing business with were gonna be best friends, but I never got any business out of them. And they liked me, but I didn't earn their trust, and I wasn't a local. So it took a while for me to cultivate to the West Coast.
Earning someone's trust, that's huge.
Yeah.
How do you suppose what's the best way to do that? How would you recommend for
Oh
somebody to
man,
earn
just
somebody's trust?
being honest, being sincere. I think people can smell, bullshit a mile away, and so it's about being honest and sincere, and to keep your promises. And again, it's something you got to earn.
So how long did you live in Arizona?
Just 4 years, so it was great. I got married in 1993. Gosh, I guess I'm dating myself here. And my wife and I, Juliet, we moved to Phoenix. Had two of our three kids there in Scottsdale, and again, that was a wonderful experience because I had set up an office for my company, and then successfully, and they let me allowed me to move to California, which is where I wanted to be because my wife's family was from Orange County, and that's ultimately why we settled there.
Scottsdale, Arizona is gorgeous, man.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Of course, back in the '90s, it was still it's nowhere near what it is today in terms of it being built up, and especially the freeways. I mean, it's gotten twice the size
Well,
of it
now
is.
what you're saying is now it's probably at a point where it's maybe like the roads are probably really bad and the traffic's gotten crazy there.
Well, yeah, like anything else, a lot of people have moved there, but they have good infrastructure. They have the highways, but where I lived, I was in almost the most northern end of the city. Now it's just like considered midtown because the city's moved and expanded northwards. So it's a beautiful place to live and especially raise young family. But California was ultimately where we wanted to be.
So being in California now, and being that this is a music show also, what are some of the bands that you've seen? Have you seen some really good concerts out there?
Oh, in California?
Yeah.
Yeah, again, um, I'm a big I have a variety of, music that I like to listen to. So, I'd say right now, I'm just like an old rock and roll fan. I mean, I love U2, I love, Coldplay, I mean, I could just start naming bands, Fleetwood Mac, Eagles,
Are you listening to music in your car mostly, or
uh,
in your home, or as you're running? Where do you get your music fix?
I listen to, Spotify mostly, probably in my car and at home. I'd say mostly in my car, but I've gravitated over the years to Christian music because my faith has grown much stronger. And there's a lot of good Christian music out there. People think it might be kind of corny, but there's some good rock and roll bands, and the whole Christian music. Evolution is really taken off, and I think it's becoming a larger genre amongst music.
We talked about this in the green room about your faith, and
Yeah,
we're going to get to that in the show for sure.
sure.
And we will talk about Christian rock and roll because that does interest me.
Yeah,
But I also want to talk about some of the music that like really influenced you when you were a kid.
yeah,
For an example,
yeah.
you talked about athletics, right?
Right,
And you talked about having a lot of friends growing up.
right.
So, like, what were you guys listening to back then? I mean,
Well,
this is 1970. I want to say probably 75. You
oh
were
man,
probably into
yeah.
it, right?
Oh,
Oh,
in the '70s, you got really good English, rock and roll bands like Led Zeppelin and some Bad Company and some of the other. But you know what? I had a brother who was really into Southern rock, and he kind of turned me on to Southern rock music. So I got into Leonard Skinner and Marshall Tucker, Allman Brothers, a lot of those bands.
Did you have a record collection? Like, did you actually go out as a kid and buy records, or I guess back maybe even 8 tracks, right? Since we're dating ourselves here,
Yeah,
8 tracks.
I
Like,
had
did you collect those?
I had 8 tracks, believe it or not. Yeah.
But not cassettes though, right?
8 tracks first, then cassettes, because I had an 8-track player.
But most people's cars, by the time you were probably driving, it was more cassettes,
Yes, I
right?
I went to cassettes.
And then
I
it went
think
to the
I
compact
think
disc.
my dad had a 8-track player in his Cadillac, so that's
So I'll tell you a funny thing. I used to collect records, and unfortunately, this is another whole nother episode. But my mother threw my record collection out
Oh, why'd you
um,
do that?
because she told me about for 6 months to come pick them up because they
Yeah.
were moving, and I kept blowing her off because I was, and then finally I went to go get them, and she's like, "Yeah, they're gone." I put them on the curb,
Oh my gosh.
and it was a great collection.
Yeah.
So
No, but my musical tastes have changed throughout the years. I mean, in the 70s, it was rock and roll. 80s, I got to college and there was a lot of good disco music then. And of course, when you're at parties in college, you dance to disco music. It's hard to dance to rock and roll. So I got into the whole disco music scene too.
that's a great point you just made because the
Yeah.
'80s were so diverse. Because when the '80s came in, right,
Yeah.
and then the '80s left, it was two different worlds.
Right.
Because like you said, you even had a punk rock thing. You had like a punk rock thing.
Exactly. Yeah. The
You had
British
the whole,
invasion.
you
Yeah.
had, but then you had the Saturday Night Fever.
Right.
So in my high school, there were guys that were the disco guys that
Right.
would dance and they would dress and they would like those guys.
Yeah.
Then you had the rockers,
Yeah.
that were listening to like WLIR and WDRE and all that.
PLJ.
The Clash.
Right.
You know,
Exactly. Yeah.
and then you had the diehards, the Zeppelin guys. I
Yeah.
had friends that would walk around high school with books and their records. Like
Yeah.
they would carry their records around to
Right.
school.
Yeah. Yeah.
Led Zeppelin, Physical Graffiti.
No, I had the same experience.
And then Kiss, was always there, the
Yeah.
Stones.
No, the rock guys never ever would listen to disco, and then the disco guys totally would never be into rock. So I think I was different because I was open to all of it.
But then during your college years, right? So like now we're back in the mid to 80s, music got really fun.
Well, it
you
became
know?
more poppy. There's a
There-
lot of popular
Yeah, there was more
music.
danceable stuff, right?
Yeah, like Lionel Richie and Whitney Houston and Michael Jackson. Of course, he was huge.
yeah,
in
it was
it. Yeah,
big.
yeah,
But I think the biggest records I think were the Eagles' greatest hits, Michael Jackson's Thriller.
yeah,
I think those were like the biggest selling records of all time. I
Yeah.
want to say I think AC/DC,
Yeah.
Back in Black was in that list.
that was good. I liked REM too. REM's a good band.
Interesting.
So I was all over the place. If I heard a good song, I'd
But
tune in.
then you moved to Arizona, and what happened then? I guess the '90s, right? The Pearl Jams,
I was going to say
Nirvana's,
yeah.
Soundgardens, all that stuff. Alice in
Right.
Chains.
Again, I was a young dad then, so I really probably didn't indulge as much. But yeah, those 3 bands that you named, I was a big Pearl Jam fan.
Do you think being a dad listening to music, like were your kids into like what you were listening to?
Well, again, when you're driving with 2 kids in car seats behind you, you don't want to be cranking Pearl Jam, So, I had a lot of, Disney stuff and that kind. But yeah, I still, when I didn't have the kids in the car, I still like to turn it up loud and listen
No,
to
because-
AC/DC or
Because you know
Pearl
what's
Jam.
funny? A lot of the musicians that sit in that chair that come in this podcast is that
Yeah.
they tell me that their father and some, mostly their mother too, but
Yeah.
they grew up, in the car listening to their dad's choice of music, and it inspired them.
Yeah. Yeah, again, our dads listened to that was the Frank Sinatra years and some of the real big bands. But
DJ Thomas, raindrops keep falling on.
Yeah.
Easy listening, right?
no, it's really good stuff.
Burt Bacharach, that was the stuff
how
I think
about
that,
Herb Albert
Yeah,
and Tijuana Brass?
right.
Man,
So that was like late 60s, early 70s. That
Yeah.
was their pop,
yeah,
like that generation, right?
Right. the Carpenters. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I could listen to that. Sometimes, if you listen to satellite radio, they have 60s on 6, 70s on 7, 80s on. I mean, so I listen to different genres sometimes, just being in the mood.
Did you ever take piano lessons, or did your parents ever get you into some guitar? Or
It's
something?
one of my biggest regrets is not taking piano lessons. I always used to mess around on the piano and I used to kind of make my own songs, but I really didn't have any kind of musical background. And we didn't have a piano at our home, but I'd go to friends' houses. And actually, my grandparents had a piano. It's probably out of tune, but I used to go there and just bang on the keys.
Little
And
chopsticks.
more than that. But I wish I had more. Most recently, I've been taking some guitar lessons.
Well, look, back then you probably were so into athletics, right?
Yeah, it was finding the
know,
right time to do
And
it.
you still had to do homework at some point.
Right,
So it was hard for you to fit in lessons, right?
right.
You know? But were your friends in bands? Like, did you go to high school with guys that were playing?
My brother was in a band. He started a band that started in his basement called Hold the Mayo. So I used to listen to him a lot. But as far as my own friends, I hung out with the athletic crowd, and again, we were busy, playing sports and getting homework done and trying to get good grades to go to a good school. But no,
So now you probably saw a lot of live music, right, between New York and living in California. So what were some of the
yeah,
bigger shows in your lifetime? What were some of the bigger, better rock and roll shows you've seen?
my first concert I ever been to was in Madison Square Garden. It was Bad Company, and I remember going to see them. And but I wasn't a big concert goer because I just didn't like. I'd prefer a smaller venue. I mean, I'd hear a lot of live music on North Avenue in New Rochelle because it's a college town. There'd be a lot of live bands that would come and play in the bars. But I back then, gosh, again, there was I went to a Beach Boys concert once. Chicago was big. I went to one of their shows. Um, but I wasn't a concert goer per se.
But in Orange County, there's a couple of venues there, right? There's some really good venues
That's different.
it's different when you go to California. When I saw the Grateful Dead, the few times I saw them in California, it was a completely different vibe and a completely different audience than there was in New York City.
Right.
Because out in California, with the weather being so beautiful, I think people dress differently. I think people are in a different mindset. It's more of the hippie culture, at least with the Grateful Dead,
Yeah.
than it was, seeing them in New
Well,
York
it's
City.
it's convenient too because the venues are local. You can just drive to them and be there in 15 minutes. I mean, in New York, you have to get on a train or drive into the city and park to go to a show at the Garden, unless you're living in the city. Um, probably one of the best shows I was ever I went to is seeing U2 in the Garden, and
Oh, I love you
that
too.
was an exceptional show. And that was at their high, the heyday when they were just
Sure.
yeah just getting really popular.
I recently saw the Eagles. I saw the Eagles play in Tampa, and the Eagles are fantastic live because they play everything note for note. It was amazing.
Yeah,
They played the whole entire Hotel California record, then they played their greatest hits afterwards.
yeah.
It was an amazing concert.
No, it's great. My brother took me to see Sting too in the in the Nassau Coliseum, and I think we sat in the front row, and that was an amazing show. And Sting's just an amazing.
Hey, did you ever go to Las Vegas and go to a thing called the Sphere? The
Yes,
Sphere.
no, I saw.
Am I right?
Yeah,
What is that? Explain that.
it's hard to explain, but it's like you're inside a giant golf ball, and if you're inside a golf ball and you're looking at the edges of the ball, it's all shaped like a sphere. That's they project the image of the band, and the sound system is amazing. So you don't even have to look at the stage because you got the images of the band playing right around you.
So is it one of these things where I'm looking like this when I'm at my concert and I'm looking all around me? Is it like a 3D?
Oh yeah, it is, and I only have a light show, but you have like I saw you two when they played "Where the Streets Have No Name," and you had all of a sudden the screen was like this red desert, sunrise, and it would come up, and then then you'd see the band. I mean, it's hard to describe, but it's something that if you haven't experienced it, I definitely recommend that.
So what were some of your favorite jobs growing up?
Oh man, I've had a few different jobs. Um, I was a lifeguard. Of course, we live near the Long Island Sound, so lifeguarded occasionally. Painted houses. I think one of my favorite jobs is working for Seven Up Bottling Company. I delivered soda in the South Bronx. So
That must have been an
our
experience.
trucks would leave the New Rochelle plant. We'd drive down to the Bronx. The particular driver I was with, we'd have the South Bronx, and we'd have all the bodegas right behind Yankee Stadium. So we would get up early and get the soda delivered before it was the afternoon hit because then all the crazies come out. But it was a fun experience, and I enjoyed
So
that.
you've had a variety of jobs. You've had blue collar jobs. You've had white collar jobs, right?
Well, the white collar job is really not until after college, but another good job I had was I worked for a moving company, and I just busted my ass. I mean, I was working 9 to 5, moving furniture in and out of houses and uh, office equipment in and out of
That's got to
offices.
be a great workout too, right?
It's a great workout. It's a lot of work, but you're paid in cash at the end of the day, and it was wonderful. I made a lot of money, but at the point I got it to one point where I had to start working out for the football season, and I had to tell my boss, "Hey, you're giving me too much work," and he was like, "Really?" And so he scaled it back, but it was a great season. And again, the experience of working with guys that really are blue collar guys. And again, I went off to college and then got a white collar job, but these guys are doing these jobs their whole life, and you develop a respect for them. And I always had that. And to this day, I really respect people that work with their hands and people that get up and do the work that makes this country go.
I agree 100%.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to what you're doing today.
All right.
So you're wearing a hat.
Yeah.
It says "Baptize America." Why don't you explain that to us?
This is an event I went to in Huntington Beach a couple of weeks ago, actually. And basically, it was about a couple of churches coming together and wanting to baptize people that have never been baptized. And so It started as a movement now, and it's spread across America. And actually, this Sunday is a continuation of that. There's a lot of churches that are doing baptisms, either in their churches or at pools or in the ocean or in, any body of water you can be
So why
baptized.
don't you explain to the audience, like, why would somebody want to be baptized and what actually is a
A
baptism?
baptism, well, in the Christian faith, there's two trends of thought. One is that babies get baptized, and especially a lot of denominations feel that you're not going to heaven unless you're baptized. It's a sacrament, say of the Catholic Church, but in some non-denominational churches, they baptize adults. And I was baptized as a child myself, but then I decided probably 4 or 5 years ago to be baptized as an adult because it was my decision that I was making. It wasn't my parents' decision. I actually want to proclaim my faith amongst the community. So again, a baptism doesn't get you to heaven, but it's a proclamation. It's basically the analogy is I'm married. This ring doesn't make me married, but it shows the world that I'm married. And so when you declare that you're a follower of Jesus Christ, you want to be baptized because again, it's the declaration of your faith.
So are there still a lot of people that are looking to be baptized?
I think so. I think there's a real movement within the country, especially in the younger um, generation in college campuses. We've seen a gravitation towards more younger people going to church, and just being open to reading the gospel and learning about what Jesus Christ is all about, who Jesus Christ is all
You
about.
know, I saw a movie and I don't remember the name of it. I'm sure you do.
Yeah.
But it took place in California back in the 60s. And I guess the
Oh yeah.
Woodstock movement had
Yeah.
ended.
Yeah.
And there was a large amount of young people seeking salvation, maybe
Right.
looking to be.
Well, they're seeking direction. I mean, the name of the movie was Jesus Revolution, and again, I encourage anybody especially if you love rock and roll music, you just see how the Jesus Revolution started with the hippie movement in the 1960s and 70s, and it started in California in this small church called Calvary Church, um, and it's a story of how these people that were basically, always strung out on drugs and getting high, they were just like, there was something missing. They realized that there was something more to life than just partying, and they started following this very charismatic leader to church, and it was a movement that just grew. And at the same time, Christian music came on the scene, and of course, the traditional worship in a church is organs and hymns and people in robes. This was a generation or a movement where people would just come as they are. And basically, to get a message regarding the gospel, which is all about
So is
Christ.
it safe to say that it's changed the landscape of church going in some cases where in the older days there were pews and Bibles and there was choirs and it was very formal?
Very rigid.
Whereas in this particular sense, maybe now kids are showing up in shirt and shorts and t-shirts,
Yeah.
and maybe there's not a formal music direction.
Right. There's not a formal liturgy, but when I went to California, I was amazed that I could actually go to church in a t-shirt and jeans and hear some good music as well as a message from the pulpit. So, and that's very different. Especially in the Northeast, especially there's a lot of traditional churches, and there's nothing wrong with traditional churches. I enjoy them, but the gospel is open to everybody, and you don't have to be a certain age or from a certain class. I mean, it's the beauty of the Christian faith is it's wide open. Anyone is welcome.
Let's talk about your faith, man. How did you come to your faith? Like,
Yeah,
let's talk about your progression,
that's
because you had mentioned earlier that, you went to church, but you weren't really that into it at the
well,
time when you were younger.
I always remember that I believed in God my earliest memory. And it's funny, my parents took our family, and I have a brother and two sisters, and we'd go to church on Sundays.
What kind of religion was it? Was it
It
a
was a
Christian?
Presbyterian church, so that was a Presbyterian denomination, and so basically, I got educated on who Jesus Christ was, and I had remember as a child always believing, and of course, you learn the Lord's Prayer, and I remember just as a child just always believing, always praying to Jesus,
But was it like a fearful time in your life where, like, you're gonna go to hell and God could be powerful, and, like, was it that kind of a religion for a young
no,
person?
no, I think what it starts by basically you got to ask yourself the question, who am I and what am I doing here? Okay, if you think about that, it's kind of a scary question you ask yourself. And so then I realized that there's basically two choices. One, we could have just like, evolved from a monkey, which is crazy, the whole evolution theory. The other is that we have a creator, a divine creator that made us in his image, and that God is real. And if God is real, I felt that he loved me and was always
So
looking out
even
for
at a
me.
young age, you felt that.
Yeah, and I realized I was blessed by having 2 parents and a family and just a good life, and I just felt grateful and thankful, and I realized that it was God that blessed me with these things. So I realized that I was blessed from an early age, and I was just it grew out of, the, thankfulness and joyfulness.
Were there events in your lifetime that perhaps maybe increased your faith or showed you a different light
Yeah,
or direction?
it's weird because I grew up as a non-Catholic, but I went to a Catholic high school, so kind of felt like an outsider in a way because I didn't, practice the Catholic faith, and of course I was a minority. Um, but so, but in the back of my mind, I still said to myself, like, I still believe in Jesus, just like everyone else. But I mean, I didn't worship him in the way that my Catholic friends would. So I'd say my faith really took a turn and started growing again when I got married and had a family, and I realized I wanted to join a church and then really get into um, understanding, the gospel. And actually, when I say that, people are like, well, what do you mean understanding the gospel? Well, there's more to the fact that obviously Jesus died for our sins and he was resurrected, and we believe that. I'm talking about reading the Bible, actually opening it up and reading it cover to cover, which I've done, almost a dozen times now. It's amazing. It's an amazing book. And if you think about it, it's the best selling book in the history of the world. And I encourage anybody who's never read the Bible to read it because it will change your life.
Do you think it's safe to say that you've read the Bible after all these years now in different sections? You've more or less read the entire book?
Well, easy way to read the Bible, okay? And by the way, if you don't like to read, there's an audio version of it, but there's what's called the daily Bible. And of course, if you invest 30 to 40 minutes a day, every day of the year you get a reading from the Old Testament, the New Testament, a proverb and a psalm. And every day then there's a commentary, which basically commentary is they explain what it is you just read. And if you read through that Bible every year, I actually have my older sister doing it right now. She's read through the Bible all last year. She did as a goal for herself. She's doing it again this year, but it's just a great way to learn and educate yourself. But aside from reading it, it's important to get into some type of a formal Bible study or fellowship where you're discussing it amongst other people. And that's what makes it enjoyable.
What do you say to people who say, I believe in God, but I don't need to go to church, that my church is, my living room and that I'm spiritual?
Yeah,
Like, what do you say to people like that? That maybe they either they're naive or they're uneducated as far as like the whole breadth
yeah.
and depth of Christianity?
Yeah. Well, what the church is people. Church means a gathering. It's a gathering of people. Okay.
So
And
it's not a building, right? Per
no,
se, it's a community.
no, it's the church that I meet in is an old warehouse. I mean, it doesn't have to be a beautiful church with stained glass windows and a steeple. Church is anywhere a gathering of believers get together. That's church. Think about it in the book of Acts, which is the formation of the church. The disciples, the apostles, after Jesus went to rose and went to heaven, they were left with nothing but themselves. They met in what's called the upper room, and of course, the church grew from there. And again, I'm reading the book of Acts right now in the Daily Bible. We're in that section of it right now. It's a wonderful story about how the church started and how it grew. And it explains it.
So these people are now together. What's the next step? The Gospels, accepting the Gospels as a Christian document.
Well, you know what? I think a lot of Christians won't read the Old Testament, but I think the Old Testament is so rich. Okay, in the Old Testament, Jesus Christ is concealed. Okay, in the New Testament, He's revealed. So if you read the Old Testament, you understand. First of all, the story of creation and the story of how the Jewish people became God's chosen people, and of course, Israel is all about Israel. As a Christian, I realized that I evolved from we as Christians were grafted into the Jews, and after Jesus came, and so we have a lot of respect and reverence for Israel and what God's chosen people did in terms of leading their way all the way up until Christ came on the scene in the gospel. So after you read through the Old Testament, and it's so rich with information. I mean, we can have a whole discussion here about the Old Testament, but you get into the New Testament, which is the Gospels. So the Gospels, there's four Gospel writers: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Each Gospel is different, but they're either eyewitness accounts themselves of what they saw and heard, or they take from eyewitnesses and they basically
Do you
wrote
personally have a
letters.
favorite of the four?
If you're reading the Bible for the first time, I'd say read the Gospel of John because the Gospel of John focuses on Jesus as the Son of God, Jesus as the Messiah, and it's uniquely written. as opposed to the other gospels. They're referred to as synoptic gospels because they're very similar. Now, the Gospel of Matthew, Matthew was an apostle of Jesus. Matthew was a tax collector. He wrote his gospel to a Jewish audience because he wanted to tell the Jews, who Jesus was, that he was the Messiah. The Gospel of Mark was written to a Roman audience, a Gentile audience, because at the time the Christians were being persecuted in Rome, and he wanted to explain the authority of Christ. Luke was the only Gentile writer in the entire Bible. Okay, the entire Bible is a Jewish book, but Luke was the only non-Jew to write his gospel. His gospel was directed to a person called Theophilus, who was actually his boss, and his gospel is all about taking an eyewitness account and following uh, Paul and some other of the prophets and the apostles on their missionary journeys to explain to Theophilus who Jesus was. So again, they all have a different flavor. They all include different parts and parables and lessons, and it's just that it's so much great information. And even if you're not a believer, it's a great book to read.
What about your church today? Let's talk about your church and your commitment to your church and your involvement with your church.
Uh-huh.
What do you do there? What's your role or what's
Yeah,
your
so my family and I, we joined a big church when the kids were young, and there was a great children's program. But they kind of outgrew that, and so we went to try another church, uh, which for various reasons was really a good church for us. But we were looking for something smaller and more intimate and family oriented, which is the church we've been the last 10 years. And um, I was actually asked to be on the board of that church. And so basically, what that does is it's a responsibility to just oversee the decisions that we're making in terms of what we want to be as a church. We have the church I'm at right now is basically has three pillars. One is reading through the Bible every year. That's what we do as a church. The second is where we emphasize prayer a great extent, and the third thing is community. So the church that I'm at right now is not a Sunday only experience. Every day of the week, there's actually an opportunity to be involved in either a community group or a Bible study,
they call them small groups?
small groups. But again, it's when it's community is sometimes it's an overused word, but it really is. It's kind of church that when I go to church, I feel like I'm meeting my family, and a great sign of a church is when the service is over. Do people run for the exits and get in their cars to get home, or they stick around and start wanting to talk to each other?
Approximately how many members are at your church right now?
About 150.
And is that growing? Is that
That
less?
you know what? Our desire is not to grow. First two reasons why we don't have the space. Number one, but we just feel like it's a comfortable number, and so everyone, I'd say 80% of our congregants are involved in a community group, and a good percentage of them also show up to the women's and men's Bible studies that take place on Fridays.
So you prefer the smaller groups, the
Yeah,
smaller
more,
churches.
more intimate.
But
Yeah,
there's also some very large churches that I know about there.
Large churches are good. They have a different purpose. But to me, you can get lost, especially as a newer believer. You can get lost in a large church. So my advice to anybody thinking about joining a church, no, every church is different. Know what the church stands for. I mean, if you want a Bible believing church, I mean, we put the Bible and the Word of God as the supreme, um, over anything else. A lot of times, pastors will talk about topics and be very opinionated on the pulpit. We basically dissect what the Scripture says and what it means, and then we apply it to everyday life.
See, that's important to me when you apply it to everyday life,
Yeah,
because then you could use that information. So now if you're not, that astute or that educated, you hear a sermon, you hear it, and you could take it home with you
right.
and you can apply it to your life.
Yeah,
Whether
exactly.
it be your wife or your kids,
No,
your relationships.
and there are certain pastors that just do a phenomenal job of that. I mean, there are
Is that an art form? Like when these guys are up there writing these wonderful sermons, man, like I always wonder, like when I see a really good sermon,
yeah,
I say to myself, wow, this guy really put some time and effort into this,
yeah.
man. He's a smart guy.
It's not easy. I spoke at my church last week. It took me 2 weeks to prepare for that sermon.
Because you want to be funny a little bit in the beginning,
Yeah,
comfortable, like break the ice.
right.
You know what I'm saying? Like you would maybe like when you were younger
Well,
and you were given a presentation, you understand that you had to like, have an introduction and you had to get to the,
right. Well, what we talked about earlier, how do you get people to trust you? You have to be likable, right? We talked about that, and you have to be sincere. And
trustworthy.
people don't want us. There are some very knowledgeable and faithful pastors that just aren't gifted at being good preachers. On the other hand, there are people that are laymen and not necessarily ordained as pastors, but they just have a gift for public speaking. And so it's a combination of both. You want to have the knowledge, you want to have the credibility, but you want to be able to reach your audience. So again, if you're thinking about it, it's not us that are we're not giving the sermon. I didn't give the sermon last Sunday. God spoke through me. He gave me what he wanted me to say to them. And so if you look at it from that vantage point, we're being used as vessels to deliver the Lord's message, which is the gospel of Jesus.
And so what else do you do at the church?
Um, well, again, I kind of help out whenever I can.
Do you go overseas at all or do anything, any missions?
I'm involved with some missionary work. It's not necessarily associated with my church. I'm actually involved in two nonprofits that I work with. One's called First Love Ministries USA. If you're interested in checking it out, it's flmusa.org is a great website. And what we do is we have two ministries within that organization. One, we serve an orphanage in Africa, and the other one is a ministry in the very rural and poor section of Romania. And we got involved with these two for various reasons, and those are stories unto themselves. But I had the privilege and the honor of going with my wife to Africa last June, almost a year ago. We went to Africa, spent 10 days there, and visited our ministry partners there. 600 orphans. Our ministry. We're being used by God, so it's all His. Give credit and glory to Him. But we feed our orphans, we clothe them, we educate them, we move them into a skill center after they're old enough to try to give them skills that they can use to be functioning human, adults on their own. Um, Romania is completely different. I was there in April. We flew into Bucharest. It was just the capital of Romania. Again, Romania was a communist regime for many years, and of course, in 1989, communism ended, and basically the communists really turned their back on their countrymen. Um, Although Bucharest and some of the other parts of Romania, which is a beautiful country by the way and worth visiting, they're flourishing now, and they're really doing well. They're part of the European Union. There are parts that we traveled to. So after we flew into Bucharest, we took another puddle jumper flight to a city called Suceava, and then we drove an hour north of that. So we were on the outskirts. If you look at a map, we were right below Ukraine, right below.
And what was the goal there?
We built our ministry built a church there to serve the local community, and we basically it's really very simple. We provide wood and potatoes and medicines to widows over there that are basically they're forgotten countrymen of
And how did
Romania.
that make you feel though when you like went over there and you saw how desperate they were and that you were able to help them with your group?
Yeah, the one thing about missionary trips is you think that we're these Americans and we have all these ideas and we're going to go over there and we're going to just bless, whether in Africa or Romania in this case, we were blessed. We were welcomed and loved on, and they were so happy that we would to take the time to go see them and develop friendships and relationships. I communicate with the number of people I met there through WhatsApp, and so we stay in touch with them. And
Is it possible for your faith to even grow and be stronger after you experience those types of things? Like when you were flying back, were you like, "Wow, man, I'm really like excited to do more," and the Lord has blessed us and
Yeah, I mean, there's no more greater joy than actually serving others. Okay, again, I was in the business world for 33 years, and everything in the business world is about getting ahead. Getting at the top of the sales charge. Getting your awards at the end of the year, making as much money as you can, and there's nothing wrong with making money and being ambitious. Okay, but I'm in this position now. I'm no longer in the corporate world, where majority of my day is about what I can do for others, and I've had more joy and fulfillment in ministering to others, even if it's by just having a conversation with people and giving them a word of encouragement, or giving them direction, especially with young people. I have a desire um, to come alongside younger people.
have you gotten any trainings or have you done any like workshops or have you gotten certificates or degrees?
No formal training other than being involved in my church. And so again, if I come across somebody that needs real counseling, I certainly will pass that off. And I don't claim to be a psychiatrist or a counselor. There's a lot of people in our church in particular that are working on sobriety. People that are clean and sober, and we're a sober friendly church, meaning that as a representative of our church, we don't drink in public, and of course. It just gives us a feeling of being, people walking in, they're not judged. They're walking through hard
Sure.
times. Some of them just got out of jail, but we love on them, and we let them know that, again, what I said in the beginning, the gospel, the church of Jesus Christ is open to everybody.
What are some of the needs though? What are the biggest needs of your church? Like, do you need more space? Do you need more money? Do you need more, Bibles? Do you need more,
Mhm.
supplies?
The churches that we support in Africa and Romania, yes, to all the above.
So
Fortunately, the American churches, most of them, if you have a good, a steady congregation, we receive donations and tithes, and so I wouldn't say there's, we have a need for a bigger building, and of course, our goal would be to buy our own building and so to grow the church that way. But the biggest need is not something physical; it's more just spiritual of nurturing to the people that come there. I mean, I've seen people's lives change by being regular attendees at church because not only are they getting a message, but they're getting a sense of belonging, a sense of
But
community.
is there a recruiting effort that goes on, or do you just hope that they just walk in? Like, is there a 50-50 battle there? Like, yes, you have to like get people to come into the church, but at the same time, they should want to be there by themselves and not.
It spreads amongst, I mean, people that love our church will tell their friends and their friends. So I've seen over the 10 years we've been there, a lot of new people come, and I always ask, well, how did you hear about us? Well, sometimes it's through the internet. They just wanted to find a church in their area that they lived. But most of the time it's like, well, so and so invited me. And there's not, I mean, there are so many people that are waiting to be invited to church. They don't know it, but if you just give them the opportunity to say, okay, I'll come and check it out. And again, the sense of community and being in a faith-based environment is life changing.
There's a commercial with Mark Wahlberg on television about a certain prayer app,
Yeah,
and it's gotten a lot of traction. I mean, I'm seeing a lot. Those commercials are not cheap
right,
because they're like on prime time and on Fox Network,
right.
and I'm seeing a lot of them. And
Yeah,
so what they're doing is it's an app. Somebody owns that app, or
right.
somebody purchased an app or built an app, and now people can go to this app.
I've seen it. What's it called again? It's
Oh God, the prayer app maybe
no,
or
it's
something.
it's not a prayer app. It's I'm gonna think of it when we're done with this conversation. But yeah, Mark Wahlberg, a couple other actors that are Christians. The actor from The Chosen is another one. But it's again, it's an opportunity for prayer. Um,
I like when I see Hollywood actors when I see them now actually talking about their faith
mhm,
and proclaiming their faith. Some actors have received awards, and instead of the spiel about blaming the government or their politics, they'll thank God and they'll
yeah,
talk about their faith and they'll
right.
encourage people.
Yeah.
And I think that's wonderful to see more of
Well,
that.
not only with
Like
actors.
Hollywood, like Hollywood seems to be more embracing of it than ever. I think.
Yeah, I've seen it not only just with Hollywood, with athletes. Okay, if you watch college football on Saturdays, and the star quarterback or running back or receiver who had a really good game is, the microphones in front of them, and they're always thanking the Lord Jesus Christ, which is wonderful because again, it's a way of witnessing. And so, Jesus Christ shouldn't be an offensive name. Unfortunately, in our culture, it is, but it's becoming less so because people are open to confessing their faith. And of course, if you admire somebody from afar and see somebody like a Dennis Quaid who just made the Reagan movie come out and profess his faith that he's a Christian. It's like, wow, it gives permission to other people to say, you know
But
what, I'm a Christian too.
but why do you suppose that was the situation? Why do you suppose people weren't proud of it or they weren't talking about it?
Because they're shunned in a way. It's almost like, years ago, when you heard that somebody was coming out, it meant, well, they were gay, and now they're going to be public about it. And now it's kind of like, well, he's a Christian, he's coming out, he's admitting his faith.
Or Republicans?
Yeah, there you go. Somebody wearing a red Trump hat. People aren't afraid to do that anymore because. But again, it's crazy that there's so much judgment in the culture. But to answer your question, I just think I think there's a real revival going on in our country, and it's starting with the youth. That people are not afraid to say, "Hey, I go to church. I believe in Jesus Christ." It's one thing to thank God, but when you use the name Jesus Christ, that's the power right there. Okay.
What would you say that your individual mission or what's your purpose? Like, what are you trying to do? What's your passion here?
Yeah.
Like, do you want to inspire others to follow Christ?
Yeah, in any way I can. I mean, again, I'm involved with these ministries. I'm involved with my church. I like to lead younger men and mentor younger people to come along in their faith. Because again, life is it's not easy. Life, okay. There's so many obstacles. Okay, the three biggest obstacles to life are Satan, who's very real and he's all around us, although we can't see him because he functions in a spiritual realm. Then there's the culture that we live in. Okay, we live in a horizontal culture, not a vertical culture. People think about wealth and power and influence. Good looks. These are all things that are fleeting. Okay, but the most important thing is just really for the first. Sometimes people don't do enough of it to realizing that hey, eternity is coming for every one of us. Okay, this is a very short life, and where do you want to spend it? Do you want to spend it in heaven with the Lord, or do you want to be without the Lord? Again, the word hell is not mentioned in the Bible, but being absent from the Lord is basically being in hell, and it is a real place.
So, Eric, as we wrap up here, somebody listening to this right now that's thinking about going to a church for the very first time,
Yeah.
thinking about perhaps maybe learning about Christ, what would you recommend to that person?
Uh,
What are the basic steps, the
just
first steps?
be open minded. Find a church, and then be open to sticking around either after. I mean, every church I've gone in, there's people who want to welcome you and shake your hand in the beginning. There's always opportunities to get involved with like a Bible study or a group. Um, all churches have opportunities to get involved with events, whether it's like picnics or fun nights. Um, just get involved. It's a community. I mean, it's so much more fulfilling than hanging out in bars or just doing things that aren't going to grow you. I mean, just be open minded to it. You don't have to be this. You have to be don't have to be a diehard Christian follower of Jesus from day, but you have to be open to it. And so, if you do that, I think it's life changing, and it's all for the better.
I think that's the key, life changing,
Yeah.
right?
Who
Who
again?
doesn't want a better life?
Well, I'll tell you who doesn't want a better life. People that already have a great life. Okay, and that's the sad thing. There are people that are popular and successful, and they're like, I've done it on my own. But I think the key to getting to that step to trust Jesus as your Lord and Savior is humility. Okay, you have to put aside your pride, and you have to realize, hey, this I didn't do this on my own. This was a blessing. Okay, and so if you can be humble, I think that's my favorite trait in meeting people. Just humility and putting your pride aside. And again, I wasn't always a humble person myself, but I've learned, eventually I'm going to leave this planet. I mean, death's coming for each of us, like I said, and I'm willing to surrender. Myself to realize that God's in control of my life and that I want to serve others and not just worry about my own selfish satisfactions.
Fantastic, Eric.
Yeah,
Well, thank you for coming in and sharing this with us
it
today,
was
man.
great time
Yeah,
talking to you,
man.
Kurt. Yeah,
It was
appreciate it.
great. All
Yeah,
right.
all
And
right,
you take care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.
all right, man. God
All
bless.
right.
All righty.
God bless you.